It was a matter of your personal integrity, I think you said?
Correct.
Do you really think there's room for personal integrity in the rock and roll business the way it's going?
Why not?
Alan Freed is the guy that coined rock and roll. He believed that rock and roll was the music to come. And he was right. The only problem is that all the payola talk and everything killed him as far as getting anything.
I'd love to answer all your questions, fellas. You know, I like to be nice, but my attorney doesn't want me to say a thing. So I'm trying my best. I just can't say. I'm under subpoena here.
I was dragged to Washington in 1959 or 60. They broke into my house. They tapped my phones. I found out that Big Brother's not always the good guy. I was raised in the Eisenhower era. It was a very illuminating experience. During the height of all of this, really, it's not very interesting now because you know the government is crooked. You know that. You know politicians are not straight. We didn't know that then.
It was a new type of radio, playing to a new generation, enamored with a new type of music.
So while their parents worry about the A-bomb, most teenagers just want to have a blast. Dancing becomes so popular that most local urban television stations have a weekly teen dance show, like this one in Iowa.
DJs were top dogs in radio, and as leader of the pack, Freed was high profile. He may have been bigger than Elvis at this point.
If I'm guilty of anything, I'm guilty of being present at the birth of rock and roll. A music which is the honest, spontaneous expression of today's youth.
Alan Freed was a big advocate of black music, which made him a target for the so-called establishment.
Now, nail down the roof, gang, because here's a new act that can blow it right off.
Rock and roll moved into the forefront of the music scene, the movie scene, and concerts.
Alan Freed character? As far as I can see, he's the proverbial Pied Piper who's just sort of cashing in on a few illicit adolescent emotions.
Parents, schools, churches, local government, and anyone else whose job it was to maintain the status quo. They were all outraged because they didn't like the music and the way the kids danced to it. They all thought it was the music of the devil, it was sinful, and they were all going to hell in a transistor radio.
Payola in our business was a record company or an artist coming in saying, hey, I got a new record coming out, here's $150.
The Subcommittee on Legislative Oversight began its Payola hearings in February 1960. And while many disc jockeys were involved, two would command the most attention, Dick Clark and Alan Freed.
All right, let's get this farm rocking with Jimmy Cabello and the House Rockers, and rock.
Investigators were looking for headlines in the so-called Payola scandal. Although Payola was common among DJs, all eyes focused on Alan Freed. Freed claimed payments he'd received from record companies were just for consulting purposes and not to play their records.
What about the payola charges?
What payola charges?
Well, that are rife in the industry right now. Have you ever taken payola?
No, I have not.
Rock and roll is a river of music, which has absorbed many streams. Rhythm and blues, jazz, ragtime, cowboy songs, country songs, folk songs, all have contributed greatly to the big beat.
Alan Freed opted not to testify before a Payola probe and jury. Instead, he chose to plead the Fifth Amendment. Later that year, a grand jury indicted 5 New York disc jockeys, including Alan Freed, on charges that they have accepted payola. Alan Freed was then fired from WABC, and if that weren't enough, allegedly Alan's house was seized for filing improper income tax because of the allegations that were revealed. In December 1962 in New York, Freed pleaded guilty to 2 counts of commercial bribery and was fined $300. Freed moved to Palm Springs, California, a broken man. On January 20th, 1965, the one-time king of rock and roll, top radio disc jockey, television host, music, concert, and movie promoter, died at his home at the age of 43.
He said to me, don't worry about this if that's true. They're going to put you in a giant crucible, they're going to boil you in oil, but you'll come out harder and smarter and you will survive. And that's exactly what I was able to do.